Hello, I'm Astro. I am a paramedic from New Jersey.
Awesome. My name is Timothy Gentry. I'm the host and producer here of the Shared Stories of Medicine podcast. I wanted to start this off introductory episode here with somebody that I know personally. And the idea is I want to interview people from all different facets of medicine. I think medicine itself is interesting enough, but also I don't think regular people quite understand the depth or how far it goes or how many subspecialties or specialties there are. And I also think people who work in medicine kind of have an abstract view of people, just regular people that are going through something, wild or far-fetched in medicine. So it's kind of neat to get their perspective as well. So the idea of this is to just interview different people, get their perspective, learn about what they do, why it's important, and why they do it, how they do it, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you so much for joining me. It's awesome to see you. I have not seen you in a minute. How is everything your way?
Well, things at home are good. Thank goodness we've all been fortunate enough to avoid the COVID. So
yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. Because you have a family that you have to keep safe as well, right?
That's right. I have a wife and 2 children.
And none of them work in medicine either, so that I'm sure puts additional strain on the situation.
Yeah.
You were saying that you were a paramedic. I think a lot of people are curious, and there's a lot of common sayings that people come forward with when you let that information out. You know, what's the worst thing you've ever seen, or tell me something crazy. They immediately perk up, and you're the life of the party. So, how many years have you been working as a paramedic for?
23 years.
Yeah, so just a sea of crazy happenings, I'm sure, and just all sorts of wild stories to be told. You probably have more than you can even remember at this point after 2 decades, but. So for those listening, I don't think they quite understand. Some probably do, but other people that are interested and want to listen in might not quite understand the depth of working as a paramedic. They might not really understand the autonomy or what it is you can do as a paramedic or just how advanced it is. So would you mind I know you've done it for a long time, so you can probably elaborate better than most, but can you just give details of what it is your day-to-day looks like working as a paramedic?
Sure. First of all, in New Jersey, all paramedics are hospital-based, and for that reason, we're considered mobile intensive care. Some of the things that we can do is IV therapy, IV medications, electric shock therapy, and even some types of small surgical procedures like an emergency crate.
Yeah, so what you were describing basically sounds like you're a mobile emergency room, just with a little more limited tools and a less controlled environment. So for those listening that might be interested in something like this, what does the path look like to becoming a paramedic? Because what you just described sounds really advanced, and I don't think people understand exactly how to get there. And a lot of times, quite honestly, I believe people hear paramedic and they think it's synonymous with EMT, which we know are 2 completely different things. So maybe you could touch on what an EMT versus paramedic is and what the schooling looks like. I'm sure it's changed over the years because you've done it for a while, but I'm sure you still have an idea of what it's like.
Yeah, so EMTs are emergency medical technicians. They're also known as BLS, which is basic life support. A basic life support unit can do things like stop the bleeding, apply tourniquets, CPR, automatic defibrillation. They can assist patients with their own medications.
Sure.
They do not have the ability to start IVs or manage advanced airways, but they can manage basic airways.
So nothing invasive is what it sounds like. It sounds like it's like you said, just BLS, basic life support. So so that I'm assuming that's a prerequisite to becoming a paramedic, yes?
Yes. So the basic life support class is 180 hours.
Okay.
So you can knock that out pretty quickly.
Sure.
And then to move on to the advanced level or the paramedic level in New Jersey, that's going to require an additional 2 years of schooling.
Okay, so this is more or less like an associate's degree. So it's a pretty lengthy commitment for people looking to follow that path to become a paramedic. It's not a short task, an overnight thing.
That's correct.
So you're doing classroom time, and I imagine you're also doing clinical time in your training, right?
That's correct. I can't recall the breakdown of the hours, but you'd spend quite a bit of time in clinical rotations. That includes in the emergency room, labor and delivery,
Awesome.
The operating room.
So you have to rotate around with the paramedics as you're a student, and you have to learn all of the skills, and then they just kind of, after you're done, they cut you loose to the wolves, or do you have to take a test, or where do you go from there when you're finished?
When you're finished with school, yes, there are actually quite a few tests that you have to take. You have to take practical exams as well as didactic exams. You move on to different certifications, the National Registry certification. You can build on that later on or immediately after with Flight Paramedic, which is a board.
Awesome. So this is a when you finish and you get that national certification, this is a job that's transferable to anywhere in the country, or just about everywhere in the country?
49 states.
Oh, okay. So the majority, there's just some holdouts, or maybe some of the territories don't accept national registry.
That's correct.
Oh, that's interesting. That's pretty cool. So moving past the schooling, you started out, you became a paramedic. Where did you work? You worked all around Jersey all of the time, or were you working in cities? Were you working in
most of my experience has been urban. I started in New York City.
Yeah, I'd say that's urban.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. Paterson, New Jersey.
Yeah, North Jersey.
North Jersey. Jersey City, New Jersey.
Awesome. Jersey City is like just right across the waterfront there. That's like an extension of New York City, huh?
Yeah, a lot of people call it the sixth borough.
Oh, might as well be, yeah. So you have always worked in busier, more built up areas, and I'm sure with that comes more experience. Am I right in assuming that you probably see more just based on volume?
I would believe so. Yeah, I mean the volume is certainly greater in an urban environment versus, say, a rural environment.
And how has that? I mean, that's easy to visualize, but how has that shifted over the years? Because you say you've worked for 23 years, and I'm trying to imagine, because the delusion that most people have with no experience or interaction with somebody who works in emergency medicine, the idea is that it was, back in the day, a taxi cab. It's get in the ambulance and they'll give you an Uber ride to the hospital. So over the last 23 years, I'm sure it's changed significantly in terms of like autonomy and practice and what you're capable of doing.
Yeah, 100%. There was a time where a paramedic couldn't really do much before consulting the doctor. So, that created a tremendous delay in life-saving measures.
Sure. Yeah. So you have somebody dying in front of you, and you have to phone a friend, basically.
Yeah. It was awful.
Yeah. So that's tough. That's tough to deal with. I don't know how you tell somebody who's actively dying that they have to hold
Like,
on for a minute, that you're
right.
being put on
Hold
hold.
on one. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So when you say call a doctor, this is a doctor in the emergency department that you're calling?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they kind of dictate what it is you do as a paramedic, or they write your
They
protocols, or?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
They when you call, they're there for guidance. You can if you work up to what you're allowed to with your standing orders, you can request additional medications, therapies, etc.
Sure. Okay. So if you wanna go beyond your scope, or you want to do something that's risky, it sounds like you um, basically get a consult with that doctor.
Correct.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So I imagine there's a lot of difficult things you could touch on over the last 23 years, and I don't want to dig too deep if you're not comfortable answering it. But what are some of the, and this can be in the past or the present, what are some of the biggest challenges that you face as a paramedic?
Oh boy.
Yeah, that one cuts deep, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm just trying to summarize it in a way that perhaps would make sense to a broader audience.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, because the assumption is that not everybody listening will have experience in medicine. So they might be just somebody with no idea whatsoever, and they think, wow, that sounds awesome. I want to do it. That sounds like fun and blood and guts and gore and
So it's all of that. It's all of that. The most challenging part is being a paramedic. You kind of always feel like you're on this emotional roller coaster. You know, when things go right, man, there's not a feeling in the world that can compare. Honestly, it's just amazing. You know, you feel great because you know you made a difference. And then when things go wrong, not so much. And it takes its toll. You know, learning how to balance that and living a normal life is difficult.
Yeah, I like how you put the air quotes over normal life, because you see all of that, and then you turn around and go home and take off the uniform and just act like everything's normal. So yeah.
You know, it's a privilege. Being a paramedic is a privilege.
Sure.
You're privileged in a lot of ways. You're there for people when they need someone to be there. That's you.
Yeah.
It's a privilege and a burden, you know.
Yeah, for sure. So, it just sounds tolling on mental, physical health. I read a lot of articles about people working in medicine just, suffering silently and whatnot. So I can totally respect that. I'm just trying to think, when you said the highs are really high and the lows are really low. To me, I'm trying to understand how it is you would come down from either or. How do you decompress? How do you shove it off to the side?
Nowadays, a lot healthier than in my younger days.
Sure, yeah.
So nowadays, I'm very privileged in my life now. I have a nice little house with a nice little property, and
sure,
that keeps me busy on the weekends, and keeps my mind off of things. I have a little garden and plant flowers. And
I was just going to ask, do you have anything like meditative, like a Zen garden or something like that? Or that's nice.
I do.
You have ways to wind down or to cope, and that seems important with the challenges. So that also got me thinking, when you say it's a lot, and when the lows are low and there's a lot of bad things happening, I imagine just constant sensory overload. Things are happening everywhere. Like a plane crashes, there's people everywhere, there's explosions, et cetera, et cetera. Do you ever get tired of making rapid decisions?
No, that's God. I think that's one of those parts of this job that just keep you coming for more. You know, working under those conditions and making quick judgment calls and the right ones most of the time, you just appreciate the world a lot more,
Yeah, for sure.
The other part of this job, it's a blessing in many ways in that it humbles you as a human being, no matter how bad I think I have it sometimes, I always get dispatched to somebody that's got it a lot worse.
A lot worse.
A lot worse.
You walk into the house and the house is falling apart, or
God, just the way some people, it's tough out there, and as a paramedic, you really get to see it,
I feel like you have the you have a pretty good, firsthand view and experience of what that person's going through. The beginning of the puzzle, you get to kind of piece it together using the environment to your advantage. That humbling is a really good way to put it. Kind of puts things into perspective for sure. Obviously this is a really volatile time to be working in medicine, and the COVID-19 pandemic has been affecting everybody, not just people that work in medicine. But I'm trying to think of a world where you're not affected by COVID-19. How is it going as a paramedic working during COVID-19? I mean, anybody with direct patient contact, it seems like a nightmare.
It's been awful. For the first time in my life during this pandemic, I suffered a major panic attack, and
sure.
Never ever in my life have I felt anything like that. It was just spontaneous, and it happened over the last, I don't know, 10 months or whatever. It's probably happened at least 3 times total, 3-4 times.
I don't think you're alone.
I've never had those issues ever,
I think that's a perfectly.
And I've been around. I've seen some stuff, but never had that problem. It's been a drag, man.
That seems like so much strain put on an already stressful job.
Yeah, it's been difficult. I'm in a leadership position now, so I have
Awesome.
paramedics and EMTs that are on my watch, and
so you're in a
watching
supervisory role.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm watching a lot of my staff suffer.
Yeah.
And it's a pandemic. It's been a true strain. It really has.
So what are some of the, obviously, I think anybody listening can perfectly picture why it is you're frustrated and why it is stressful, and anybody who has read or turned on the news for more than 2 seconds can relate. But specifically, what changed about the day-to-day? I imagine you guys are strapping on full head-to-toe PPE going into these houses.
Yeah. So that just so many things that. So we'll start there. So yeah. So now there's additional precautions that you have to take before you enter someone's home, right?
Yeah.
Or pandemic. So you got to protect yourself against the COVID, but that takes a couple of minutes. And while you have a screaming family, hurry up, get in here, not really appreciating, what you have to do to protect yourself and your family. It's been difficult.
Yeah, I imagine some more challenging. It's already a high tension situation, and then some more challenging cities being worked in. I mean, I know I'm from the Northeast as well. I know how tough it can be and how harsh people can be around Philadelphia. So I can definitely visualize that. You're trying to protect yourself, but they can't empathize because their world's falling down around them, and whatever's going on is a complete emergency and just completely hectic. Okay. Yeah, I'd imagine that puts people in a tricky situation. How do you even navigate that? How do you mitigate that when somebody's screaming at you and you're like, well, I'm not going to go, blazing in there without any protective equipment on and then give my grandparents COVID when I go to, Thanksgiving dinner. How do you even de-escalate a situation like that? I can't imagine.
Very tactfully.
Yeah.
Just very tactfully.
Very calmly. I imagine if you get more worked up than they do, they'll lose their minds.
Yeah, that wouldn't be conducive to a good environment. You don't want you don't want to get back.
So this is interesting. So you're in a supervisory role. I think the PPE and that entire scenario you just described is easy enough for everybody to visualize. But what has affected you in your position as far as this pandemic goes? Are you seeing people just jumping ship and saying, forget this, I don't want to work in medicine anymore? Or
not so much. We've had a couple, but not as much as you would think.
What about like call out? Are people calling out because they're afraid, or are people getting sick and then they're out because they're sick and now you're short staffed? Or
yes, all of the above. Yeah.
And so now, what do you do as a supervisor if there's nobody to work on an ambulance? What happens to it?
Well, I would jump on the ambulance, even with another EMT if I had to.
Okay, so you come down from your supervisory role and you'll work on the street if there's a shortage. Correct. I got you. Yeah. So you're first in line for that, I'm sure.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have a lot of coworkers getting sick?
Yes. Yes, yeah. We've had quite a few get sick. Yeah.
It seems hard to avoid because anybody who has direct patient contact, and especially in any facet of emergency medicine where people are spewing bodily fluids all over the place, I imagine that's the most likely place to get sick. It seems tough to avoid.
The environment is certainly not controlled. Actually, it's very far from a controlled environment. It's very unpredictable. There's a lot of dangers, and that's just getting to the ambulance. You're
at the mercy of how safe that patient is themselves or the family or whoever else. Like you said, they're spitting and screaming in your face as you're walking in. It's tough to avoid that. Yeah. That's definitely tough. That raises the question. That makes me think: Do paramedics in Jersey or anywhere else around here? Do you know? Are they getting hazard pay for the pandemic? So
most healthcare systems were paying what they called a surge pay. It was an additional, set money amount to have you come in because we were so short-staffed.
Yeah. So it's kind of like an
incentive, a bonus.
I was just going to say, an incentive for people to jump onto those needs, those vacancies on the truck. That's interesting. Because I hear a lot of, I read a lot of people that work in medicine griping about we don't want the heroes work here signs out front of our house. We want hazard pay, or we want appropriate compensation for putting our entire family and ourselves at risk directly coming in contact with COVID-19. That I was just curious. I didn't know if anybody was giving clinicians, especially for your particular interview, paramedics, hazard pay. So there's little incentive bumps around where you're working. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was nice. I think it was well-deserved,
I would argue it's still not enough, but I think well-deserved is absolutely correct. Moving past a call, when you finish, you drop the patient at the hospital, you tell the doctors, the nurses, hey, here's John Doe, here's what's going on with him. What does it look like from there? So I think people understand you pick them up and you drop them at the hospital, and then obviously you're not going outside to play wiffle ball. What does the cooperation between you and the emergency department look like?
Tim, 1 second.
No problem.
Bro, you got to repeat that whole thing.
Yeah, no worries. So I think a lot of people know, the before and the during of being a paramedic now that you described it. But when you drop somebody at the emergency department, you're not just turning around and leaving. I imagine there's some sort of cooperation between you and the emergency department. What does that look like between you, the doctors, and the nurses?
The handoff. So depending on what system you work at, I worked at one where when you walked in, you had to go to the doctor immediately. But most systems now will tell you to check in with the charge nurse. So when you walk in with the patient, you check in with the charge nurse. You give a full report, what's going on. You start from the beginning till arriving at the hospital. Unless it's a trauma patient, so you'll be directed to go into the trauma room where you're going to give report to the trauma team.
Sure.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of cooperation between the ER and paramedics. Actually, so much more.
Yeah, so
and just working together. I mean, we're all kind of like a big family.
So if you have somebody in cardiac arrest or some acutely ill person, and you deliver them to the hospital, and you're talking to that charge nurse, and they're getting triaged, you don't just put them on the bed and walk away. It's not far-fetched to think you jump in and assist in interventions with the hospital, or
all the time. Yeah.
That's good. That seems like a good cohesion to have.
Oh yeah, it's great. I mean, it's great for the patient. It's
if you drop somebody off at the hospital, this now makes me think, and you're curious, because I'm sure as there's a lot of enigmas in medicine, and you're curious what happened to that particular person. Do you ever get formal follow-ups?
Yes.
That's awesome.
There is a process that is obviously all within the confines of the law, but we can check into our patients.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you're directly involved in patient care, I imagine it's pretty seamless to get a follow-up on somebody, especially if it was a critical case. That's interesting. I think that's good. That's good to get the follow-up, because you don't always have all of the information, and it's kind of nice to put the entire puzzle together afterwards.
Yes, absolutely. And it makes you a better provider because you're more aware and conscientious.
Yeah, for sure. So now here's a loaded question, and you can dive into specifics, or you can be as specific or as vague as you want. Do you think paramedics, and I know it varies everywhere across the country, do you think paramedics are paid enough?
No, I think paramedics are tremendously undervalued.
That's the sense I get as well.
Yeah.
And is that in just Jersey, or is that nationwide? Is that across the entire country?
I believe it's across most of the country. I think on the very West Coast, they're doing okay with regard to their salaries and compensation packages. But I think the rest of the country, including New Jersey, I think their paramedics are very undervalued.
Now, I just think cost of living. I imagine, $100,000 a year in Los Angeles is a lot different than Kentucky. And maybe that's incorrect, but I imagine compensation is relative to where you live as well, or am I completely wrong? If you live in a more expensive part or a busier part of the world, you make more as a paramedic?
Well, what I mean by paramedics are undervalued is, when they do their cost of living averages and they put it together in a compensation package. Of course, it's always specific to whatever region you're in, and they want to make sure that you're comparing, or making at least what everybody else in the area is making for that specific job. But what I mean is still they are just undervalued, I believe, in most of the country. I still don't think that society really has an understanding of what paramedics truly do.
They don't.
I don't believe so. They still think that we just drive you to the hospital. That we're ambulance drivers,
Yeah.
which is a very insulting term.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have a joke amongst ourselves, right? You don't call a police officer a police car driver. And you don't call the firefighter a fire truck driver. Okay.
Yeah. And I think, hopefully if somebody, whoever, the millions of people I'm sure that are going to listen to this, wink, wink. Hopefully this will give them a better idea of just how expansive your autonomy and your capabilities are as a paramedic, because I think you're right. I think there's a lot of delusional people out there, and it's not their fault. It's just it's hard to know without knowing. So I would say do you think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about paramedics, is that they're just an ambulance driver, or an Uber, an ambulance, or a hospital Uber?
Yeah, I believe that is the biggest misconception. And it's hard for society also to understand the difference between EMTs and paramedics. Because we kind of look the same and drive similar vehicles. That look the same.
It's so much different, though. I mean, as you said earlier, it's literally a difference of 2 years of education.
Yeah, it's a totally different job.
Yeah. So it's the EMT part of it is just the prereq. That's the that's the start, and then you move on to the higher education, where you do some real advanced hands-on skills. That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing with me. I really enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun. I think this was a really, really good introductory episode. I think people are going to be really excited to hear about what it's like to be a paramedic, especially working in the busy places you worked. I'm not going to ask the age-old question that makes anybody who works in medicine cringe, which is, what's the worst thing you've ever seen? Because I don't need to know it. I think the information you gave is important enough. Also, if anybody that's listening to this podcast, if they're interested in becoming a paramedic, I think you gave them a good foundation to work from. If you had to give them your Astro advice, your icing, your topping, whatever on the cake, what is the advice you would give to the young up-and-comer who wants to become a paramedic?
Once you are in paramedic school, keep reading. Read all the time. Don't ever stop.
Yeah, I mean, it seems by nature, as a facet of emergency medicine, it seems by nature ever evolving. It doesn't seem like something you can just become complacent with. You have to constantly read up on things and stay educated. That's really good to know. So if you're listening and you want to become a paramedic, keep reading. Don't be a dummy. Astro, thank you so much, dude. It was awesome seeing you.
Thanks for having me, man. This was a lot of fun, bro.
Great introductory episode. So thank you.
Awesome.
It went very smoothly, and I'll be sure to I'll shoot you a text later.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome. Good talking to you. Be well.
Later, brother. Stay safe. Good night.